A mom called me, her daughter's body was changing. She's 10 years old. Hips are widening, the balance is disrupted, the jumps are feeling a little bit different, and the mom wanted to know what to do about the weight.
Yeah, just to provide you context, the mom had watched this competition, her dancer at this competition, and she noticed that she was not jumping as high as before, or actually that it just looked a little bit labored. And then the week thereafter, the competition posted some pictures of the dancer online, and she saw that the dancer was gaining weight. So luckily, she didn't approach her daughter directly and decided to do this discreetly by phoning us. And that call is the reason that this episode exists.
Yeah, because what we told the mom is so important, and every parent and a young dancer should hear about. And this episode is about the myth of the perfect dancer's body. Let's dive in.
So there are these calls that we'll get every year, and they'll follow a very similar pattern. It's quite consistent, and we can actually script them from memory. A parent will ring us and say her daughter has been dancing for years, she loves it, and she's good at it. And then something will shift. She'll hit this age of 12 or 13, and the dancer who lived in the studio starts finding reasons not to go to the studio.
We get a version of that call for boys too. A boy who suddenly hates how he looks in his unitard, or a mom who noticed her boy has started training obsessively twice a day even, because someone made a comment about him not being strong enough. Oh, and by the way, if you like this type of content, could we ask you to like and subscribe on your platform of choice? And just write in the comments your questions or reflections. We promise to read and answer every one of them.
So where does this myth come from?
Yeah, the idea that a dancer needs a particular kind of body to be legitimate has an origin. It came from the aesthetic preferences of some powerful men, of course, in the 19th and early 20th century, and they watched ballerinas perform. They had opinions about what they should look like.
I think Balanchine's name comes up most often and is most cited in research, and he liked this particular type of dancer. So it's long limbs with a small head and extremely thin, by the way, where the ribs are almost on bones are almost sticking out, and proportions that had to do with a visual kind of ideal, but nothing to do with a body that actually needs to dance well and stay healthy over a long career. And these preferences have become a kind of standard. And what one man found very visually appealing became this criteria by which girls were selected or turned away.
And for the boys, it was broad shoulders, narrow hips, muscular. We need to understand that history, it is still affecting your dancer today. And when I was 21, I was in ballet class, and my ballet teacher walked to me. I was at a bar, I remember where I was, and she looked at my legs and she said out loud, without any particular emphasis, that my legs look like pudding. And it was quite shocking, but I carried on. And it didn't occur to her to think about what she was seeing and how she was framing it.
Yeah.
And the next day, she remarked to another student in class that her dancer's legs look like chipolata sausages. And now it didn't affect me that much, luckily, but it just stuck with me because the other dancers were younger than me in the group. And while I was rather confident about myself, I really felt concerned for the younger students in the group.
Please let us know in the comments if you heard some similar remarks that you would like to share. That teacher was most likely teaching the same way that her previous teacher would have taught her. And we must say that's another moment in time. And now times have moved on, and we know that the teaching world and the methodology has changed over time. Maybe she could have just said to you, hey, listen, Ineke, could you try activating the inner thighs or the inner thigh muscles and the glutes?
Yeah, what a difference if she would just have said that. And we want to say something that most people in this type of conversation tend to avoid. At the highest level of professional dance, the way a dancer looks, it does matter. It's true.
Physical attributes will always be considered when you're auditioning for an elite ballet company or professional school. That's just a professional reality, and And pretending otherwise doesn't really serve anyone.
Yeah, because some of it is functional. You might think like partnering in classical ballet, it has practical logistics. The girls are generally expected to be shorter than the boys who will lift them, and the boys are expected to have the physical capacity to lift them safely, and that's just basics.
That being said, different companies will have different aesthetic looks that they're going for. There's not really a single universal standard, and it means that a body that does not fit in one company might be just perfect for another. So the professional world is actually more varied than the myth suggests.
Yeah, and dance, after all, is a top sport. And like any top sport, the expectation at professional level, at least, is that you look like an athlete. You function like an athlete, and you take responsibility for your body like an athlete.
We've noticed this over the years, working in our own studio and watching pre-professional dancers develop, that they eventually will mature into the best-looking version of themselves. There'll be awkward growth spurts, certainly a loss of coordination, and they themselves think that the proportions are off at this delicate age, about 12, 13, 10 to 13 years old. And they're just phases, and companies know this, schools will know this, talent scouts will know this. Someone that demonstrates genuine potential will always be considered. That is a real fact.
Who is this episode actually for? Let's start with who it is not for. When a pro adult dancer auditions for a company, they walk in, they're adults, huh? They walk in and with open eyes. They know the aesthetics of the company and they know what the company is looking for. And they are making an informed decision about the environment they are stepping into. At least this is not who this episode is for.
And so this episode is actually for the dancer who's not there yet. It's for the teenager whose body is still developing. And our job as parents, as teachers also, is to protect them during that developing phase that they're going through. It's quite a vulnerable phase. And to help them understand that what they're going through is only temporary.
Yeah, because puberty does a lot to a dancer. When a girl hits puberty, typically somewhere between 10 to 14 years old, the body changes very fast. And the changes are specific and disorienting, especially for dancers. The hips widen, the pelvis tilts and broadens, there's breast development, which shifts the center of gravity and it will change the weight distribution. It will affect their balance and pirouettes. And so growing bones bring also increased tension in the attached muscle and tendons. It's really tight and that reduces flexibility. So the young girl who just got out of bed and falls into her splits naturally will suddenly feel restricted.
Yeah, we had this time when we didn't have this information, and we saw a really flexible dancer, and then suddenly they hit this age group, and yeah, it just doesn't work anymore, and they look like they've never been in a split before, and it's quite disturbing, and even for us as teachers,
Yeah.
it was.
Well, now we can tell them
Yeah.
they.
Now, yeah, you have better information.
And I do remember the dropouts are also in that particular age group, like in the teenage years, they might drop out.
Yeah, we used to call it the minefield
Mm.
period, and everyone walking through this period was, and you saw all these dancers just dropping off. And I think boys can also gain, like, on the other hand, can gain several centimeters in a few months, and it's been reported that they feel like they're dancing in someone else's body. Unlike the girls, when there is this peak height gain and there's this peak weight gain, and there's approximately about 8 months, 9 months in between. The boys don't have this. It seems like the entire body seems to grow taller and heavier at the same time, and of course the nervous system cannot cope with this. There's this distortion, and
They look a little bit clumsy also.
yeah, they suddenly look very lanky and clumsy, and the coordination is suffering.
Yeah, but boys, as we said before, they are expected to be strong, to partner, to lift. But there is that gap between the expectation of the adult body and the reality. We also talked about this in episode 1 of this podcast about the pressure that boys are facing just for being in a dance studio or just for coming into that room.
And they will start to compensate for it, and they will start to overtrain. and they'll start to force it through this transition because that's the only thing that they understand at that point of time. And we need to catch this particular instinct. It needs to be identified and certainly redirected.
What we do at our dance studio in our classes during this period is we try to focus on other things because it's rather frustrating when you're flexible and suddenly you're not. So we tell our students, why don't you focus on musicality, artistry, storytelling, maybe on the port de bras, because what that dancer needs is just reassurance. It's temporary, it's just biology, and it'll pass.
So how do we get through this? So we covered this in depth in our episode number 4. It was on REDS, which is relative energy deficiency in sport. We'll link it to it in the show notes, of course.
In the first one of this framework, there's 3 parts. The first one is eat well. No diet, no restriction, not focusing on only one food group and ignoring all the others. It's just a balanced, varied diet and in moderation.
And for the boys, they might develop this obsession with protein, for example, or supplementing and trying to build muscles like really quickly. But the constant remains for them is just eat a varied diet, eat a balanced diet, and also enough food.
Yeah, they will be hungry, but enough of the right food. Yeah. The second one is rest and recovery. Dancing requires 9 to 11 hours of sleep during adolescence. It's a lot because the growing body needs that just to repair muscle, consolidate learning, to regulate the hormones, and to stay mentally strong during training. Otherwise, if there's not enough sleep, it will eventually degrade their mood and concentration, and they might get more injuries because of that.
Yeah.
And then the motivation will drop.
Yeah, think about it like in which life stage that of a human being does the body grow the most, and that's when the human being is a baby actually, and that's why they also sleep that much.
Yeah. Our boy doesn't like sleeping so much, but we say when you sleep, you grow, and that helps.
And the third is of course to train intelligently. It doesn't mean more training, but just making sure that the training is age appropriate and also focusing on strength and cross training and other disciplines. Trying yoga, for example, or Pilates, swimming, for example, will help to develop the body in multiple planes and reduce the risk of overuse of a particular type of muscle, especially in dance. Our son Milan, who's studying at the Royal Ballet School, he calls on regularly, and he mentioned this one day that there's a daily competition
Challenge.
in the dorms on how many push-ups that they can do. And so sometimes it goes up to about 100 push-ups, which is, of course, quite unnecessary at this age. On the other hand, boys will be boys, and it's also quite amusing to watch them pushing each other in this way. I mean, we wanted this kind of environment, of course. So it's like a little bit delicate. It's quite nuanced.
Yeah.
And it's just like
It's
2 sides of the same coin.
They have fun, and then we gently redirect. It's not needed to train like that hard.
So what does research tell us? There's a substantial body of research that has been done. And the best data that we could gather was this systematic review of about 33 studies that have been published in the European Eating Disorders Review. And it says categorically, there are about 16% of all female dancers, ballet dancers, have an eating disorder, which is significantly higher than the general population.
And for the boys, the research is thinner, but it's also consistent. Male dancers face body image pressure more than the general male population. And it centers on being muscular, being lean, and the functional appearance rather than thinness alone.
Yeah. So the question is, what actually predicts whether a young dancer will develop this sort of body image problems? And there were 3 factors according to research. The first one is internalization. That's this moment when a dancer stops seeing the ideal body as an external standard, but they start to internalize and start believing that there's something they need to work on.
And the second one is social media exposure. We talked about this in many of our episodes. It's especially the appearance-focused content. So be mindful about that.
Yeah. And the third and the most relevant one for us parents are remarks about the body from, let's say, teachers, peers, or even family members. So you could be talking about someone else, and your dancer could like internalize the message for themselves.
There's a triangle of responsibility. When we talk about a dancer's development, there's always three parties involved. You have the dancer, then you have the home environment, and then you have the school, the teachers, or the studio. And a dancer can negotiate this awkward phase, especially when all three are aligned and communicating and they're saying the same message.
Yeah, and the myth gets its power because of all 3 points of the triangle, which have historically reinforcers. So there'll be a school that'll set a certain aesthetic standard. There'll be your parents who will absorb it and they'll echo it at home. And then there, of course, there's the dancer who will internalize it and starts to measure themselves against this particular ideal.
Yeah, the myth of the perfect dancer's body. But changing the narrative requires all three also. Like the school can't succeed if home undermines it, and the parents can't help it if the studio sends mixed messages. And a dancer will find it difficult to escape their beliefs when it's ingrained since childhood.
So what can we do at home? Because commenting on a dancer's body is not automatically harmful. We've really struggled with this concept and we've been thinking about this really hard. But we came to the conclusion it just depends on how you do it and whether your child has context. So Milan goes to boarding school. He's away for about 3 to 5 weeks. So when he comes back and we notice a difference immediately, we see that he's grown or he's grown more muscular or stronger. And when we mention this, yes, of course, we do it with certain love and warmth, and it's just what comes natural as parents, I suppose. But when we see another dancer who's looking, abnormally thin, we also talk about it. That is just a conversation around health. We want to teach our son to read the world, not to rank the bodies, of course, but providing context.
Yeah. But what is damaging, on the other hand, it is the constant appearance driven commentary. This one got bigger, he let himself go. And your child will absorb this as information about what their own body should look like with no context whatsoever.
Yeah, we're dealing with human beings, um, and it's a thing to be aware of during puberty is it's about how your child will absorb that information. They have this internal filter, which is quite black and white, or it could be a little bit distorted because their own relationship with the body is turbulent and everything feels charged. But we're hoping that you know your child and you can read how this information will land. So trust it and just adjust when you need to.
Yeah, it's having those real conversations. Also don't have to hide the things from your teenager because the silence creates even more uncertainty than the honesty ever will. If an eating disorder is a topic you do not want to talk about, it's also awkward for your child. If you notice something about another dancer that concerns you, you talk about it openly, you give context and with care. And that is exactly how your kid learns to think about bodies rather than judging them.
That's true. And of course, every family will handle this differently. We completely respect that. But we do ask the parents, especially from our studios, to model a positive relationship with one's body. Give the child context, even though it might be different from their understanding of the situation, but just keep the conversation going.
Yeah, and create an environment at home where eating well is just the base. Like it's how things work. And not only for the dancer, but for the entire family.
How would you do that?
Why don't you go grocery shopping with your daughter? Also cook together when you can, like make a pizza from scratch, load it with the good stuff, like vegetables and other stuff, instead of just reaching for the frozen one. It's still a pizza. It's just a better pizza.
Or maybe if you don't want sugary stuff or sugary drinks in for your child, just don't stock up on it. And if it's not in the fridge, water just becomes the default. I think the key is that the whole family has to do this. It's not fair to ask your particular dancer not to do certain things. Well, as the rest of they'll look at it like, yeah, the rest of the family is enjoying it, and I'm like suffering through this.
Yeah, it would be unfair and they will see through it immediately. Because when the environment is normalized, it stops feeling like something strange. It's just the way it is.
What could the parents look out for? What are some warning signs?
Especially watch for the changes in the eating itself. It might be skipping meals or saying, oh, I had food with my friend already, making excuses at dinner. They might be hiding food or they're suddenly cutting out entire food groups. They might also have an obsession with eating healthy. You might think, oh, good, but it's obsessive. And if it was not there before, just watch out. Um, Also, watch out for the mood shifts around food. Meals should be like a happy family gathering. And when it becomes tense, it might be a sign.
It might be signaling that there could be a problem. Dancers love to check themselves out in front of the mirror. That's fine.
And there's mirrors.
Yeah, some of that is okay, but when it becomes a constant obsessive checking, when they're like starting to pinch themselves, posing, constantly, it looks like that's as if they're punishing themselves. They'll be pinching their skin to check for body fat. They'll pull at the clothes constantly. They'll dress in multiple layers to hide their bodies. And also when they start to become quiet, that's never good, I suppose. Also watch for training that changes. If once they enjoy training but now it causes more anxiety than them, wanting to go to class, that's also a warning sign. Check if they're still joyful, they feel joyful about dance training, or is it more like that you have to drag them to rehearsals?
Also, the covering up, what you said, the layers, but also pulling away from conversations that they used to be part of, and you feel that kind of withdrawal. Something might be wrong, and I would just advise, or we would just advise, talk to them, just let them know, I've noticed this, and I'm here for you. And sometimes that is enough to flip things. For sure, if it doesn't change, get help early. Do not wait before things
Yeah, we
come.
wrote about this in chapter 9 of our book, The Dance Advantage, where we talked about body image in dance. It's such a delicate topic, and it's written exactly for the world that we are in and the context in which your dancer is living in. And we'll link to this in the show notes.
I remember being that 21-year-old dancer standing in the studio in the Netherlands, listening to my teacher, how she described my legs as pudding. But I walked out of that studio. I built a career. I built a studio together with Justin. I have a family now, and I have a community of dancers that I've taught, and I watched them grow up. And here I am years later sharing this story because I do believe it's more relevant than ever.
Yeah, and we would like to pose a question to you. The question is, what have you built at home in the way you discuss, dancers' bodies and around nutrition? What foundations have you laid that your dancer can stand on, especially when someone says something that is not true about them?
Like when the pudding story comes back to them, are they ready to handle that with care? Because also your dancer is always listening to what you're doing, always learning from their environment, from what you say and what you don't say, and especially how you live.
Yeah, and this is going to be work for us as parents, and unfortunately, there's no hack. But we would still encourage you to go build an environment of trust, of belief in their capacities. Keep building on their dream, keep executing on it, and share this with whomever you think might need this. We thank you for being here, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Bye.